In the last few years, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency prices have risen to astronomically high prices. With that backdrop, there are three key questions which I definitely have pondered a lot about, and you should too. The first question is, should you invest in Bitcoin or crypto in 2021? Second is, what is the technology behind Bitcoin or crypto? Essentially, what is blockchain? And the third is, what is the value proposition and future of Bitcoin crypto? So let us start with the third question, the value proposition and future. So how do I get to that? When we think of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, what you need to understand is that they have a need to replace the existing financial structure of intermediaries. Now, intermediaries are basically your financial institutions like banks and NBFCs. Now, what do you mean by intermediaries? Now, these people are there, rather the institutions are there to facilitate a lot of transactions, because if I have to pay you some amount of money and you want to receive that money, now there needs to be a structure to that. Money essentially is a form of trust, and to form that trust you need some kind of an intermediary, or rather a centralized bank or some kind of government agency. So that kind of body is essentially the main thing which Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies are targeting at. They want to have an independent and decentralized financial network. They don't want to rely on governments and financial institutions to do their transactions. Now, that is the value proposition. So obviously, when you are removing the centralized authority, the banks, the governments, definitely you are bringing a lot of value in terms of your privacy. Now, because of this privacy advantage, I do not have to worry about my transactions being tracked by which government or which bank. I can have perfectly anonymous transactions. Now, yes, there are limits to the cryptographic anonymity over here, but largely speaking, you are having anonymous transactions because of Bitcoin or crypto. That's the value proposition. Now, what is the future? Now, obviously, future is dependent on a lot of things, a lot of regulatory actions on Bitcoin. And a lot of governments do not like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies because they are essentially targeting the structure and monopoly of government in financial domain. So that's the future and value proposition question. Now, I'm just asking you a question. Rather, I'm asking this question to myself. What will be the future of Bitcoin, and will the value proposition of Bitcoin, the privacy point, the decentralized point, and the removal of intermediaries, would they work? Would they be the same as envisioned so far? Now, that is the question which I am asking myself, and you can also ask yourself. That is the third question, and the question from which we are starting our discussion. Now, if we go back to the second question was, what is the technology behind Bitcoin or crypto, rather blockchain? Now, blockchain essentially is a way to record transactions, because if I say that I have given you 20 rupees or $20 or 20 cents, or let's say 10 euros, now who is going to approve that? Who is going to verify that? Because you are trying to circumvent intermediaries. You don't want financial institutions. You don't want banks to play that role of verification. So you need a technology to handle that. So in blockchain, you have nodes, and nodes are rather people. Rather, I should say they are computers, and computers are verifying those transactions. And when they verify a transaction, that transaction becomes the part of the blockchain, and that is immutable. Immutable meaning I cannot undo the transaction. So once you are making those chain of transactions, that gives you the name blockchain. So you can think of it in this way, that let's say in older times there was a village, and in that village there was a huge notice board, and in that notice board we used to record transactions of all the people in the village. Let's say in the village we only have 100 people, and we have 10 authorized nodes, or rather we should say 10 authorized people who are recording the transactions. So whenever there is a transaction, they will publish a note on the notice board that such and such person has given such and such amount to this person. And whenever you have a new transaction, just paste a new note. And the rule over here is that whenever you are putting a note, that note can only be read in conjunction with a previous note, and the previous note can only be read in conjunction with the previous note. So on that notice board you have a lot of notes, and every note is linked to its previous note, and hence you have an immutable structure of notes on the notice board. You cannot just straight away tear a note from middle, somewhere in the middle, and say that I have a different transaction history, because then the whole structure will fall apart. So that's the kind of an idea of blockchain. So this technology definitely is promising, and the idea of over here is the people who are authorizing the transactions, the nodes, or rather we call them the miners, they are being rewarded for doing that. So that gives you the value of Bitcoin. And there's one more thing, that Bitcoins are scarce, which means they are in limited supply. You only have fixed number of Bitcoins, and even let's say for other cryptocurrencies, the main structure is they are not of unlimited supply like your fiat currency of US dollars or Indian rupee or euro or any other currency. Crypto or Bitcoin is by design fixed in number. So if let's say somebody loses access to their key, now key meaning the way to access their Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, because this currency is not physical, this is a digital currency, so you need a key to access that currency. If you lose that key, that Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is forever lost. So let's say if you're starting with 20,000 Bitcoins and someone loses that 100 Bitcoins, those 100 Bitcoins goes out of circulation. They can never be recovered unless you can recollect or remember your key to that Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. So that's the idea and technology of Bitcoin, and we have already covered the value proposition. So now let's move to the main question. Should you invest in Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies in 2021? Now that's something which is a financial question, or rather an investment decision, which you can only base upon the previous two questions. That if you believe that the value proposition and future of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is very high, and you believe that the technology backing that value proposition is promising, in that way you would like to invest in Bitcoin. So I can again say that these three questions are not really independent of each other, or rather not even completely dependent on each other. It's just that you cannot look at these questions with the same lens. You have to look at these questions with a different lens, and then you have to come to a conclusion that what do you want to do with your Bitcoins, or how do you want to invest in the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. Now obviously these three questions which I have discussed can be looked at separately as well, but that won't be a complete analysis. That could give you a kind of understanding which is as per as your need. Let's say you are a short-term trader, so for you then the question of value proposition, the question of technology might not be that important. You could just look at the growth of Bitcoin prices, you could just look at the chart pattern and make a valuable trade on it and put your money into it, gain something out of your Bitcoin investments. Now over here obviously I don't want to get into the debate of investment versus trading, because generally I want to club investment and trading together, because essentially both these kind of people do the same thing. They want to buy low and sell high. Now whatever they are using, ultimately they have to follow the discipline of buying low and selling high. So that's the idea over here. So these are the main three questions which I wanted to ask you, and I'm even asking these questions to myself, that what is the value proposition in future of Bitcoin? What is the technology behind Bitcoin, and can the technology support the value proposition and future of Bitcoin? And third, should I or should you invest in Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies in 2021? And yes, you do not have to trust Elon Musk or even Warren Buffett for their advice. Trust your own research about Bitcoin.